All right.
I am reading Space Improvement still. I was just sort of like, I guess I do this.
Okay,
And then there's another market.
I'm getting ready to call the GAC meeting for December 5th call it to order. So we have we have a quorum. So could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Fike? Commissioner Buttry?
Here.
Commissioner Bloomer?
Here.
Commissioner Gordon?
Here.
Commissioner Grand?
Here.
Commissioner Stauffer?
Here.
Commissioner Schuler?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Great. The next item is the approval of the agenda. You should all have copies in front of you. Please take a minute to look at it. Do I have a motion to approve it?
I so move.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Next will be the approval of minutes.
We have to vote.
We get a vote? I'm sorry. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, next is the approval of the minutes. Please look at them. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Oh, sure, so moved. I had just one little. It's okay. No,
Screwing this up.
we move and then we discuss. It's
Okay,
We're good.
okay.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I noticed on page 2 that there was, it said, it talked about outsourcing. Oh, I just found it. Where was it? The last, in C2, Mr. Long advised that this work may be there should be a D at the end of outsourced in future years.
Are there any other changes or comments? Okay, so now I can ask for a motion to approve it.
Did you already move?
I think I moved. I think we just.
I'll
had to
second
pick.
that
Great.
then.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Gosh. We have public commentary. No public. Okay, moving on to old business. There's no old business. New business. We have a lot of new business today. The first is the presentation from Washtenaw County Parks and Rec staff on NAPP's prioritization.
Okay. So we've been, throughout the strategic planning process, we heard a lot from community members and partners that there would be great value to adding a parcel level prioritization to the Greenbelt program so that we could integrate that information into our decision-making process, as well as put a weight to that within a scoring system and help guide our efforts for the next 15 years. So in preparing for that, tonight we have a draft of the Greenbelt's first parcel level priorities, but that is drawn almost exclusively from Washtenaw County's Natural Areas Preservation Program prioritization. So Rosie, here tonight from Washtenaw County, was so kind to help us, and we owe her a great thanks for basically running this prioritization that she'll present on tonight for us, so that we're able to have those parcel level priorities. So I'll let Rosie present, and then I'll dive into it, and you'll see all the cool inner workings of it.
Thank you, Remy. Hello, my name is Rosie. In a way, this is old business in that I was here 2 years ago presenting this, but obviously time goes on and people change. So this is, I am here to talk to you about the land quality assessment and prioritization mapping we completed, Washtenaw County Parks completed in 2016 and 2017. Let's see, so that essentially this was a large GIS project, Geographic Information System, that deployed criteria to assess the quality of land of all natural areas and agricultural land in the county, and then went through additional criteria to pick which land out of all of that assessed land is potentially worth preserving. So I'm going to give you a quick introduction of NAPP itself. I'm sure most of you are familiar, but just in case. And then I'll go over the assessment part, the prioritization, how we have used this project, and then more specifically how this is going to be used, or what I did to help Remy use it for the Greenbelt. So overview of our program, we are funded with a 10-year NAPP millage, originally in 2000, then 2010, and we're coming up in 2020 for a renewal. We have 2 acquisition staff, and 2 technical advisory committees, which are essentially you all, but they're separated because of the way our millage is. We have money for natural areas and money for agricultural land. So those 2 committees make the decisions for those separate things. We have our Parks Commission, and then we have a whole stewardship team who takes care of everything that we buy. We have 2 methods of purchase. Nature preserves, which is just fee simple. That's kind of our big thing, but we've been doing a lot of conservation easements in the last few years, similar to Greenbelt. The goals of the Natural Areas Preservation Program are thus, and we initiated this whole mapping project as a way to support NAPP's mission as highlighted here, and especially to support these guidelines that we adopted in 2015, and it addresses those quite directly. So moving into the GIS work itself, assessments are step 1 of the 2-step process, that is the assessment and prioritization. The assessments are GIS evaluations of potential land quality relative to other land in the county. And I'll explain how that works. So, but quality does not necessarily mean that is indeed its quality, because it's all GIS based. Data is imperfect, but we do our best with the criteria that we have. So we broke this into 2 different assessments, hence it's plural, 1 for natural areas, 1 for agricultural. We chose it to do it this way for 2 reasons. 1, because of the way NAPP is structured, which I just explained with the way the millage works. And 2, because what indicates quality for these 2 types of lands is really quite different. So it didn't make sense to use the same criteria for both things. So let's look at the natural areas assessment first, which is the evaluation of natural areas potential quality. This came from the Huron River Watershed Council. They are locally famous for using this. They call it the Bioreserve Site Assessment. So we worked closely with them and just used their analysis for this part. Theirs just covers the Huron River watershed, so what we did in 2017 was expanding it to the rest of the county where that didn't go. This analysis looks at contiguous natural area, regardless of parcel. It's not parcel-based, regardless of township, crosses all the lines. And it only looks at 20 acres or larger little sites of natural area. These are the criteria that are used for this. There is list. So I'm going to show you a table of what all of these actually look like when going through the analysis in GIS. So I'm going to try to unblack box this for you a little. I'm showing you here part of the table that holds all of the assessment data. So this is what Remy and I would like look at when we're saying, hey, this is the quality of this land. So the ranking column at the end is what we are ultimately looking at, ultimately trying to achieve.
Rosie, can we
Yes.
ask questions in between, or you?
Yes,
want to-
absolutely, please do.
Since you're using the bioreserve assessment, that means
Yes.
you're doing all of the ground, the field work the same way that the bioreserve assessment does it for these?
That's a great question. The bioreserve site assessment, they do two different things. Their site assessment, they have it's a GIS analysis first.
Yeah.
So they have done this, and then they will also go and do field work,
Okay,
which
yours
is a
is
separate
not
thing.
that
We're
part.
just, yeah.
You're
mhm.
the GIS
Yes,
layer
this is-
criteria for which sites they even visited.
It doesn't matter what they visited. This is just everything in the county that exists.
Okay, but you're not talking about the list of criteria that are done out in the field by the bioreserve
No,
assessment?
no, I am not.
Okay, okay,
Good question.
thanks.
Okay, so I'm breaking down this table now. So these two highlighted columns are the raw scores of those criteria that I showed you a couple slides ago. Specifically, they are the presence of wetlands, that's the wetlands, and core habitat size. Wetlands just looks at, is there a wetland on the site at all, yes or no, binary, so 1 or 0. All of them in this example have a wetland, so they're all 1. The core habitat size measures in acres the core habitat, which is the full size of the natural area minus a certain buffer. It's saying like this is what's really good stuff in here. And it's a much greater range of numbers. It's not binary. So those two raw scores are incomparable as is. So that takes us to the next step of standardizing those raw scores, which gives us these two highlighted columns. These are those standardizations. If you're familiar with distribution curves or histograms, these are created like that. They put the scores into comparable bins with labels of 0, 25, 50, 75, and 100. So those like core habitat sizes get put on a graph, and then you're like, okay, here's where they sort of break up into these bins. Since wetlands has a binary score, rank wetland is also binary, so it's 100, it gets 100 standardization, or 0. And then all of these rank columns, for all of those criteria, that giant list, are summed into the final rank column seen here. And then this final rank column, just like before, gets put into a graph, which I have shown here, and separated by natural breaks, and that's how we get the ranking. So this graph here, the x-axis is all of the scores, like the final rank, that column there, all of the possible options for that, and the y-axis is the frequency, is the occurrence of those scores. I'm moving on to the next one. Any questions about that thus far? Okay. Okay, so that's the assessment of the natural area. Moving on to the agricultural lands assessment. Evaluation of in-use agricultural properties' potential quality. I say in-use because we did this analysis. This one is a parcel-based analysis, and our minimum criteria for that criterion, so the other one was like 20 acres or larger for natural areas. This one is the parcel has to be in at least 50% active agriculture to be assessed. And these criteria that we use here are what ALPAC uses, our Agricultural Lands Preservation Advisory Committee, uses to score properties that come in every year. So we kind of go through this again every year. These are those criteria. We did take out a couple that just weren't measurable by GIS, but that doesn't matter. So you can see they're different. So this one like looks at soil, the other one didn't look at soil. This one looks at like percentage of perimeter zoned for agriculture, which we didn't care about before. So similarly, I'm not going to break this down the same way, but it happens very similar way. That ALPAC score is graphed here, and we get the quality medium, low, low, medium, high, and high at the end there. So put on a map, all of that land assessed looks like this. The green belt is on there too, that sort of green, almost square. So you can kind of see how this just kind of shows the land use that the county currently has, because that's what it's assessing, and they kind of fill in the gaps of each other, ag and natural area. So that's kind of interesting. I'm going to zoom in and show you a little piece within the Greenbelt. This is in the northwest corner of the Greenbelt I'm showing here. Oh, sorry, this is an old one. There we go. This is what I wanted. This is the northwest corner of the Greenbelt in Webster Township. Those green dotted things are existing easements that you have. This is a little old. This is from 2 years ago, so sorry if something's changed. But those are easements that you have, and it just so happens that they were put on land that we had determined was high quality. Go figure. So this covers a lot of land because it assessed everything that exists. While this alone is valuable information, what we next needed to know was, out of all of this available land, which of it should we really care about in terms of our preservation program? Which brings us to step 2, the prioritization. So I'm going to give some background information, a lot of information on this before I continue. So the prioritization is 5 prioritization strategies that we applied to all of this, essentially more criteria, that were chosen through research, understanding of basic landscape ecology, and discussion with the technical advisory committees and the Parks Commission. We could have just prioritized the highest quality lands, the things that were labeled before as high or medium high or whatever, but we wanted our prioritized lands to have more potential functions, ecological functions, and show patterns within the county. And we applied essentially the same strategies I'm going to show you to both the natural areas and ag land, so we didn't really separate that this time. Before applying these strategies, we did first filter by the quality determined by the assessment. So only medium, high, or high quality lands got to go through this prioritization in the first place, with one exception. Okay, and I am also going to explain the term patch because I use it a couple times. Patch is just a unit of habitat. But for this prioritization analysis, a patch is functionally an already preserved place that we used to show connections. Okay. So the first prioritization strategy of 5 is corridors. Corridors are, this is about identifying and preserving existing corridors, so like physical contiguous connections between one patch, like one preserved area, and another. This prevents fragmentation from interrupting existing connectivity in the landscape. Strategy number 2 is patch expansion, so looking for preserved areas and then where can we expand those. Third was new patch establishment, so this is looking for where can we preserve where nothing is preserved, but also in a way that maintains stepping stone connectivity.
Rosie, are these for both the ag and the natural
Yes.
areas?
Mhm.
So even if the ag was more than 50% not, was more than 50% ag, you're
Yes.
using the same criteria of landscape connectivity and things like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Fourth is the ecoregion. The southeast, this doesn't apply to the Greenbelt really, the southeast corner of the county is the Lake Plain ecoregion, and we don't have a lot preserved there, and it's sort of an endangered ecosystem. So we thought that was important. And then stream protection. Basically anything that had a stream going through it got prioritized, which I think works well for your focus on water quality. So this is the background table of a selection of what the prioritization table looks like. So we see the ranking, which is the quality I showed you before. So you see all of these are medium high, and we've got priority types. These natural areas and the ag lands could be prioritized but in multiple ways, multiples of those 5 strategies, and we see that here. Some have just 1 assigned, some have 2, and one of them has 3. So these are the priorities in the end. These are what got prioritized here. I have taken away the quality because it doesn't really matter anymore at this point. So it's just ag priorities and natural priorities, which is that much reduced from what was assessed. It comes out to be about 1/3 or half of everything. Tens of thousands of acres, in fact. So moving on to project use. Any more questions on GIS stuff? Okay, cool. Project use, what we have been using it thus far, has evolved since 2017, I am very pleased to say. We used it for, the first thing we used it for was engagement. When we did this in 2017, we went around and talked to townships and the Greenbelt, and talked about how it can work with their priorities, with the township's preservation priorities, or how it can help them set their own. It also just acted as a vehicle to tend to our relationships with these different groups. We intend to use it for outreach. Barry Lonick has already used it for outreach, but when our millage hopefully gets renewed, we intend to send out to prioritized properties where we don't have a lot of stuff and encourage them to apply. We hope to use it for setting goals and kind of be like, look at all this stuff we have to preserve, you know, and it's in our master plan now, and other agencies, other counties have been asking us about it. Obviously doing this fulfills those guidelines I showed earlier, helps with the millage, being like, look how much we want to preserve. And mostly it is what we mostly use it for is a data tool to support a decision that we make. When we say we want to move forward with this property, we need to say why, and this is one of those things we can cite to say why or why not. But just one of many. What it does not do is replace site visits. Our Natural Areas Technical Advisory Committee relies heavily on going out to the places that are nominated to our program. So it does not replace that, or any of our existing processes generally. We don't look at the priorities map and go like, okay, this nomination is prioritized, so we are definitely acquiring it. Neither do we say this isn't prioritized, so we are not acquiring it. It is merely one factor in what we look at. So this is how NATAC uses it. I've incorporated it into their field review worksheet when they go out and look at a thing. And they get this little piece of paper on the right-hand side that just kind of explains how it was prioritized and where it is. So here I've used Windy Crest, which is your partnership with us. Alpac doesn't like it as much. They don't use it, but they still get this. They've always sort of incorporated the bioreserve, the natural areas part into it. And I give them, again, this same sort of sheet. Our Parks Commission really likes it. They created their own scoring. We have 1 million scorings this year that incorporates this mapping project. And it is that sort of purplish blue color, the second from the bottom there. When a project comes in and it was not prioritized with this method, they tend to ask questions, so it is important to them. So for the Greenbelt, what I could have done for Remy was just clip that data, all of that data, to the Greenbelt and be like, here you go. But what we did instead was took I re-ranked everything that was in the Greenbelt. So some of them got new qualities because now we just want to talk about what is the quality of the land relative to the other land in the Greenbelt rather than to all of the other land in the county. So I'm going to demonstrate that. So this is the distribution graph of like the regular Alpac score for the whole county and then the qualities it gets lumped into. And yeah, so we've got low, medium, high, I'm showing it there. So say I wanted to take out all of the properties that were not in the Greenbelt, so I get rid of those, so I'm left with these. Those scores that are left over create a new distribution, and so new groupings of low, medium, high, and high qualities. You can see those blue lines there are the groupings. So what happens here, in this particular case, this was for ag land, so you can see like some fell from, it was considered medium high for the quality compared to the county, but medium low just within the Greenbelt. So things fell. So what that meant was I had to remove those from the prioritization analysis because they were no longer applicable because their quality was too low. So then I took what was left over after this and then just ran all of those prioritization strategies again. And that's what Remy got. So it's very catered to the Greenbelt, relative to the Greenbelt only, but still, you know, kind of relates to our program and we can use it all together. Thanks. Okay. So I know it's a lot of like data stuff and I've been trying over the last 2 years to like break it down into, you know, into better wording. Yes.
Pros and cons of using the rankings versus just the raw scores. Like, how was that decision made about? Because that's how things change, right, with the distribution. But I'm assuming there was some reason for doing that over just raw score decision making. Is it
I think it just.
cutoffs, or is
I
it
think it helps. I think it helps communicate it better. Was probably the main, or was the main reason for doing that. So if we can say like, if we have to put it on someone else, to our commission or committees, and be like, at what score do you stop caring?
Yeah.
That makes it harder for them than if we went ahead and were like, we've put these into these categories for you.
That makes sense.
Okay, if there are any lingering questions, feel free to email me. Some of this is in our master plan that was recently just posted, and you can find it there. Thank you.
Now I'm going to present on the Greenbelt's leveraging of this data that Rosie gave us. So when you have a question for me, it'll probably actually go to Rosie because I can't answer any of this. Because as you can see, that was an extremely thorough and well thought out analysis.
Can we get the slides?
Yes.
Thanks.
And I understand far too little of it, so I'm really glad Rosie's here to answer your questions as they come up. Okay. I guess we have to move on to the second business item, which is now, we're done with Rosie's presentation and now on to,
Sorry.
no, that's okay. I just want to
Okay.
make sure we're following the rules.
Yeah, so we're on to item C2, presentation on Greenbelt draft prioritization.
Okay, so as Rosie explained, I think, she graciously ran the same analysis that was done at the county level, but limited it to the extent of the Greenbelt district. So then what I took and ran with from there was my level of GIS analysis, which is we kept the priorities that were identified in the analysis, but weeded out anything 25 acres and below and moved it to 25 acres and above, showing up on the map. And that's for our farmland priorities. And what the county calls natural areas prioritization, we have to translate to our own purposes, and our ordinance designates that as open space. So we kept the bioreserve properties 25 acres and above, but as Rosie mentioned, these aren't, the natural areas assessment didn't actually look at a parcel by parcel analysis, it was patches across a landscape. So what we did is we took the parcels that intersected with those patches and had 25% or more of the parcel containing some of that natural area priority patch. So
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
so the overlay would be, there are all these amoebas and polygons spreading across the landscape. I cookie cut it with the existing tax parcels within the Greenbelt district, and whichever parcels had 25% or more of their total area be
Gotcha.
a natural areas
Okay.
patch, it would count as one
If
of
it
our
was a
open
borderline
space
one,
priority.
basically.
Yep. Okay, so you know I'm famous for these transition maps because I'm obsessed with them. So let's start back at the beginning. It's always helpful. So Greenbelt circa 2000. And by the way, we all need to give Rosie credit for these 2000 and 2019 maps because she's the one that actually started this. I just pirated it from her. So again, okay, so Greenbelt circa 2000, Greenbelt district now. Highlighted are the properties that we've been involved with, either directly or through support to a partner. We designated farmland complexes to help guide our work, but through strategic planning, we've deemed that that is too vague, and those areas are no longer relevant, and we need to dive down into the parcel level. So explaining the analysis, again, we transition from farmland complexes to priorities. And this is all priorities within the Greenbelt district that were identified, but moving and doing a more granular level. This is the map that I would imagine generally goes out into the public sphere if we're doing an event, because is it a priority or is it not? But for our purposes, or anyone else who's interested, we would have two maps available. And this one is gonna show in orange the Greenbelt farmland priorities, and then the parcels that were identified as Greenbelt open space priorities. And as this map shows, they're not mutually exclusive. There are some properties that hit both categories. So while this one map shows all of them together, when we go into closed session and when we report to council moving forward, we are going to be able to specifically identify properties as open space or farmland priorities as designated in the parcel level prioritization. So what I want to say is that was an extremely thorough analysis. I don't see the value in reinventing a good wheel. What I want GAC, at least my recommendation would be GAC to consider leveraging the county's analysis and using it and adopting it as our own. Enhances our partnerships because more and more of the townships are leveraging the county's analysis for their own prioritization and outreach purposes, for their own millage-funded programs. It enhances our opportunities to work with the county because if it shows up in this analysis, it's not guaranteed that it's a priority for them because, as Rosie mentioned, once you clipped the analysis to the extent of the Greenbelt district, things that were medium-low turned into medium-high, or medium and then to medium-high. So it shows what should be a priority for us, but isn't necessarily for them. But it increases the likelihood that we have overlapping matching priorities moving forward so that we can increase the number of partnerships we're doing. Another important thing is that this isn't static. University of Michigan C's master's program is initiating a bioreserve 2.0 study to enhance the analysis. So what GAC adopts in terms of parcel level priorities is not static, and it will move and it will evolve with time. So it's not this is the next 15 years of priorities. It can change with time.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
Is there any effort being made to do outreach to people that know the parcels? For example, I don't know, through oral history or things like that, or is it just GIS based
No.
primarily and then their study?
No, so we will, yeah.
'Cause
I'll
I think
get to
that's
that.
something that we need to
exactly.
not forget about. when we
Exactly, and that was part of the
technologize.
strategic planning feedback
Yeah.
from everyone was, as Rosie said, yeah, GIS alone is not how you get to these answers. So what GAC is considering, I think tonight, or we can consider it a future meeting, whenever you feel comfortable voting on it, is adopting a draft for me to then go out and do a tour de township and hit every township and show them our draft priorities and then ask those questions about those people at the table, whoever it may be. What am I missing here? What should be removed from this map because it's just not going to be a feasible project? You know that that's never going to change as an opportunity, and then where are the hottest opportunities within this area or what's missing and needs to be added. And then also within that, It's not just the townships, it's our nonprofit partners, it's a number of people that we need to engage with to make sure that these are properly vetted. But this is just endorsing a draft version 1 to then go out and do that more granular engagement.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear. So the idea of this parcel level prioritization is we would do targeted mailings in context of those parcel holders, or is there something else I'm missing?
Yeah, so those are my last 2 points.
Oh, sorry.
Is that,
Jumping ahead.
so this map is not the yes or no is GAC interested in a property. Just because it's not 25 acres and above does not mean we're not interested. This is merely a tool to look at the landscape of what we've already accomplished and start to help guide our work and thinking when we're in closed session or an open session about what projects really make sense in terms of connectivity, in terms of momentum in a given area. And so it's an opportunity to assign a score to this map that can be translated into our scoring system so that each time, every time we submit a project to City Council, it comes with the scoring sheet for that property. So this is one more line item on the scoring sheet that can show yes or no,
Sure.
It is a Greenbelt priority. And then it's an opportunity for us to do that long-term planning and adapt over time and actually engage with partners more than just in conversation, but actually have parcels on a map. But what that leads to is another outcome of the strategic planning process was folks said, it's time to hit your top priorities, but we don't have that. We generally know. I mean,
Yeah.
there's only so many landowners with large land holdings in the Greenbelt district. But this was really the effort to at least put it on paper so that we can refer to something, and if someone
Sure.
asks us, who are you targeting and why, we can refer to this.
Okay.
So the next steps are, to move out to the townships, but I didn't want to do that without first presenting the draft priorities to you and getting your blessing
Sure.
to then show this to our partners and start to work from this model. So if there are issues with the way either the county's prioritization was done or issues with the way I then leveraged it to select our own properties from that selection, or our own priorities from that selection, this is when we would make comments on that.
Are you using the same criteria of 50% or more ag to determine whether it's in the open space or farmland?
Whatever was highlighted in their analysis, which would have included.
So you use the
50.
same?
Yep.
So open space became your natural area, or natural areas became our open space? And
Yes.
your ag became, okay, same
Yep.
criteria?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think as long as it is clearly communicated that this is one item on the list of criteria, and we've kind of been doing that anyway, just
Mhm.
not officially, right? Because several of our criteria overlap with the criteria that are already in this prioritization process.
Right.
But it makes it a nice communication tool of it is a priority or not. But then there'll still be several other things that are not, like the local foods aspect that we have within our goals are not encompassed in these criteria at all, correct?
Right,
Something
yeah,
like that.
and
So there would
that's
be other
where the scoring committee's decisions to weight things, so if a 20-acre property that is suitable for local food production or currently doing local food production comes up, the weighting associated with that, and while it may not pop up as a priority here,
Sure.
we can compensate for that in other ways, but without overwhelming a map and trying to communicate that we are aware that we only have 15 years
strategic.
left and limited
Sure.
capacity,
Yeah.
these are the largest opportunities at hand in terms of connectivity and bang for buck, so to speak. But that's not, like you said, it needs to be very carefully communicated that if we post this map on the website, or if it becomes an interactive map online, any landowner interested in applying should not feel discouraged because they're not highlighted on this map. That's got to be made very clear. But we have to limit the number of people we mail to, or else we're gonna
Sure.
mail to a whole lot of people. But we'd be relying on partners, either conservation partners or local food production partners, to help us identify some priorities that aren't highlighted here, and we could certainly create a subset And it doesn't have to be farm, it can be farmland, open space, and potentially there could be a layer that's just dedicated to local food priority. And that can be its own thing, but that can be iterative. We can see how this goes. And then, like I said, it's not static, it can evolve with time. So anything GAC wants to add or the scoring committee wants to change in terms of the way this is weighted.
There's also
Can
no
evolve.
carbon layer in the criteria, right?
Right,
Carbon
and that's,
certification.
I assume that would
Be
all
endless.
eventually be absorbed by the scoring committee versus on a
Cool.
priority map.
That makes sense.
Because, yeah, if I get hit by a truck tomorrow, we want this to be
Remy.
reinvent, another benefit to this, I know, right? Doom and gloom, I'm sorry. Yeah, but honestly, you know, Rosie's here and has invented this great methodology, or put together this methodology, and I've barely tweaked it for our own purposes, and that means if things change in the program, you don't have someone who's got a complex web and tangled thing that they have to decode, so,
Makes sense.
yeah. It's leveraging an already strong wheel.
Do we have a sense of what % of these, at least within the Greenbelt priority properties, already have bioreserve field data collected? Or do you know for yours, how many?
There are a few that can be collected from the Huron River Watershed Council. They will shed out.
Yeah, so, but not a large percentage of what you've deemed as priorities?
Probably not. That's another thing where the landowners have to approach
Right.
the Huron River Watershed.
Right.
Yeah, and I think too, my question wasn't so much talking to townships and other partners, but actually talking to the owners themselves
Yeah.
to see if they can help identify specific, I don't know exactly, features of the land that aren't visible through GIS or something like that. And then they might also be able to identify people that they know.
Yeah,
So
and.
I hear what you're saying, but I think we also need to have that represented someplace.
I've, more
What
than
you've said,
a couple
yeah.
of times on this year's monitoring visits, I heard from landowners, do you have a map of your priorities? I've talked to someone recently who was interested. And so being able to go to them with a large enough map that part of the monitoring visit is sitting at the table and going, here it is, you know your, 2 square mile, 4 square mile area better than I do. What makes sense here and what doesn't? And using the relationships we already have and leveraging those. So, yeah. you could
Sure,
definitely
I
see
mean,
your
I'm
map.
definitely saying this is helpful. I guess I'm ready to go to the next step personally.
Okay. Which to you is diving
also-
into the outreach and
Yeah,
engagement
yep.
and actually
And doing the on-the-ground,
sourcing the deals.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're
But
getting
it
there.
is helpful always to have a visual, for sure.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Any questions?
Well, thank you, Remy.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rosie. A lot to think about, a lot for the scoring committee to help them come together with their whole plan. Okay, then, next on the agenda is the final strategic plan report, review and adoption. And I think you all have had a chance to look at the strategic plan. There are also hard copies in front of you. And I don't know if anyone wants to speak up. I do have one typo that I noticed.
Oh,
When I read through it, it looks great. Yeah, I mean, on this multi-page plan, it's great. Just one, I can't believe it.
Where?
On page 7, in the very first paragraph, the third line, when you read the long sentence, it says basically the Greenbelt program is help ensure that over 5,000 acres of farmland will be available for future generations and be available to serve local markets as the economics and practices of farming change. So instead of and, it should say as.
Excellent catch.
But this, I also noticed, was a change from the previous version. So, that's
That sentence was?
yeah, I think this paragraph was modified.
They're a bit of a blur. right now.
The caption on page 8, I believe southeast should be capitalized, but maybe that's not that important.
Nice. At least I've got you down to this level of detail.
On page 9 with the protecting open space and biodiversity, is that, some of those might also be, okay, so you've listed out the public nature preserves are definitely separate from the farmland. But I'm wondering, did you want to tally up those total acres, or we're also trying to make the case that some of that open space and biodiversity is protected within the non-public?
Yeah.
Open, and so intentionally not creating that divide? Is that?
No, I think that's, I've been wondering how many strictly natural
Yeah.
areas easements we have.
Yeah.
It's not something I really was prompted to dive into, but we don't.
Okay.
We
And that's
ha-
fine. If we don't have it, we shouldn't put it in here, but it's something to think about.
We just
how
have a
we-
lot of natural areas
Yeah.
also contained on farmland.
Yeah.
We are starting the Hayes Conservation Easement in partnership with Scioto Township that is heading to close hopefully by the end of next week. That's a 30, I believe 30-ish acre, 44 acre, thank you. Natural area. So that'll be one of our first partner-led, just strictly natural area conservation easements that we participated in. And we have a couple others in the works, but no, we don't have a lot just exclusively dedicated to that.
Well,
Lee's
I was
analysis
thinking-
pulled out,
Yeah.
total wood, total forest land conserved and everything, but no, that was not put in here.
Yeah, and I don't think we need to put it in there, but I was wondering, should we tally up the public nature preserves? And I think a problem with doing that is it makes a false impression that that's the only natural area within all of the acres, and it's not. And
Yeah.
We could get at that later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think part of the problem is a lot of people wanted to know which lands they could personally
Public.
use, and that was
Yeah.
a comment that kept coming up again and again
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the public comment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
I
think it
useful to
might
put
need
those.
to be
yeah.
there, yeah.
Yeah, going into greater detail about the return on investment beyond just the relatively intangible benefits, the
Right.
direct benefits of I
Yeah.
can go hike here. So I think
Yeah.
that was the impetus for listing
Yeah,
it
those are
out.
great, yeah.
There's just, on that page, if you could just stick a comma between Fox Science Preserve, it's just to be
Oh, yeah.
consistent with the rest of them.
Oh, yeah.
Another good catch. So I know we had some tweaks within the actual strategic plan portion, not just the background. And I believe I caught all those from our last meeting, so. If you approve with those edits, this would go to council in January and then be officially adopted.
Any other comments? I think this is a testament to your perseverance. Thank you for getting the consultants, for getting the city to put in additional money so that we could make it a larger focus group, 4 instead of 1, or whatever the numbers were. I think it looks good.
If you could vote to adopt pending these changes, that'd be great. If
Okay.
you need to vote.
Do we need to vote?
It says approved by the Greenbelt, the previous strategic plan said approved by the Greenbelt Advisory Commission, so I didn't know if that just meant a nodding of heads,
Well,
or if it meant an official roll call vote. That seems a little formal.
I think we ought to just have a voice vote.
Okay?
Can I say all in favor of adopting? Say aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's, any nays? All right, it's adopted.
Great.
The next item on the agenda is NAPP millage renewal discussion, and Remy will lead this as well.
Yeah. So, over the last several months, some of the township PDR programs have been in talks amongst themselves and then with each other about the fact that the county's Natural Areas Preservation Program millage renewal is coming up in 2020. And some of the townships are initiating a process where they're going to submit comments, suggestions, concerns, all sorts of things in either letter form or at public comment at future meetings for the county commission. And so they're getting together and trying to put their heads together about what are some of the top items that they want to address in the millage renewal. I think that it's very clear that there's widespread support for renewing the millage. I mean, it's the most significant source of matching funds we have at the local level, and has done a lot of excellent work. So this is a memo from Barry Lonick, who is the township consultant to the Ann Arbor Township, Scioto Township, and Webster Township PDR programs, to all of those boards, discussing some of the topics within the NAPP millage renewal. This isn't something where I expect us to generate bullet points or a letter right now. This is just sort of an FYI. This conversation is happening, and it's kind of whether to gauge interest from GAC. Barry has asked me whether or not GAC would be interested in submitting comments as well. If you are, I would imagine that's something that GAC Executive Committee and myself would draft a letter and then bring to you at a future meeting for you to make suggestions on or approve, that we then submit to Washtenaw County Parks and Recreation Commission for their consideration as they prepare for the millage renewal. I think the main topic here is that currently, as Rosie mentioned, their millage is divided into two buckets. It's agricultural lands preservation and natural areas preservation. And there's a designated amount of the millage funds that go toward agricultural land and a designated amount toward natural areas. And so the townships are discussing whether or not they'd be in support of reallocating or changing the allocation between the two. But I can say for sure that that's early on in the discussion, and there are certainly legal implications to making adjustments to a millage in terms of having it be a millage renewal. So things need to get shaken out, and I need to get you guys some better information before we're actually able to submit a meaningful letter with any recommendations or just a letter of support in general. So if you have any questions, I can try and answer, but also maybe Rosie can answer some that I might not be able to, or maybe we don't have answers for you yet. That's also a possibility.
I think we all need to think about if we want to have GAC write a letter, and if we do, what we would want to include this letter. Certainly support for the renewal of the
Yeah.
millage, obviously, but I think it would be worthwhile. And like Remy said, he's willing to put together some points. We'll discuss it in the executive committee and come back to GAC with a short note.
Yep. Sound good?
Yep, sounds good.
Cool.
Okay, so that will go on, well, maybe 2 months from now.
I'd like that.
Yeah,
That'd be
right.
nice,
Yeah, Christmas.
please.
Okay, so it'll be a future agenda item.
Yeah.
Okay. Next, you should all have received a sheet with the meeting dates for 2020.
Please don't change it. It's really hard to reserve this chamber workroom, and I already reserved them for all these times. Yeah.
Just a couple of these early month dates I know do kind of fall around holiday
Yeah.
times, so
You guys have
That
not
could
been
be-
given a break since I started here.
quite tricky.
We've met every single meeting, and I
Oh.
know that didn't used to necessarily happen, so I appreciate you guys digging deep and showing up for all these meetings this past year. So we could choose to not meet in January and kind of,
Yeah, I'm just looking particularly like at the January 2nd date, for example. I think that could be highly problematic for a lot of people. There's the July 2nd meeting that kind of stands out.
nice.
There's September 3rd, which is before Labor Day. So there are just a few that I think kind of jumped out at me when I looked at
I think
this
those are going to
calendar.
be strategic
Okay.
decisions
Yeah,
and
so-
flux,
so-
one of
oh,
which
so
could be
sorry.
made now. We can make the decision not to meet at the January meeting and just push it to February, because from I can tell you from where I'm standing that we don't have any urgent closed session matters to attend to anytime soon.
Okay.
If there were, I'd let you guys know, but right now, I think we can easily wait until January to meet.
Before you came on
February.
board, we'd never had
February.
meetings if there was no need for closed session.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
definitely broke that rule.
It's a pleasure to see you, everyone.
Yeah.
This is something we can discuss too, but I had mentioned too that I'm going to have a conflict with February, March, and April.
Right,
And I
right.
wonder how that works.
We're going to vote you off.
Okay.
Like Survivor.
Voted off.
You got the students, I'm good, that's fine.
Yeah, I think, I can't remember what the minimum requirements are. No, in the ordinance, I think it does say if a member doesn't attend a certain number of meetings in a row, the whole body can decide whether or not to have them removed, I think.
I think it's usually at the discretion of the chair to even raise the issue.
Okay, so yeah.
Yeah.
So your future's in Jen's hands. Yeah.
Well, I can assure you that the scoring committee priority is there.
And
Yeah.
those meetings can continue at a different time. I just have I'll be teaching during that
Yeah.
time every time is the problem.
Okay. So let's go ahead and just not plan for January,
Okay.
Okay.
okay?
Yeah.
So we'll meet in February.
Are we keeping the July?
Real farmer vacation. Not this year.
And I think it makes sense for the Greenbelt to discuss the July and the September dates when we get closer
Yeah.
in time. We'll see what the open, or
I'll
the
do my
closed
best
session.
to get closed session things in
Yeah.
the months that are not those ones, so we can.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, moving on. Closed session.
There is no closed session.
Well, then there's no closed session.
Sorry. I always leave it on there in case of emergencies.
Okay. Report from the commission committees. There was no executive committee meeting. Remy put together the agenda. Thank you very much. The communications committee, there's no report from the communications committee. I think the way we left it was that we were going to wait till after the first of the year. And when the strategic plan was all finished and approved by council, to talk about putting a letter together to send to these potential landowner, or potential conservation easement parcels. Okay, the scoring committee.
Same story, that we're going to meet after strategic plan is approved, which is,
So our first meetings would probably be early February, and then we'd try and schedule them for the
Yeah.
next 3 months after that, and hopefully be done within 3 months after, I think, 3 meetings, 1 a month.
okay.
That would be great. It looks to me like we are at the end. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.